Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. My name is Anthony Taylor. Are you getting together with your leadership team in the fall to plan your strategic planning? Be sure to give us a call. We'll be happy to chat with you, share with you our process for aligned strategy development, and see if we're a good fit to facilitate your meeting and help you execute and implement your strategic plan. So thank you for joining us again on the podcast. Today we have a special episode where one of our analysts, Grace Liu, is interviewing Rob Attwell, who's the COO of Careteam Technologies. He shares a little bit about his startup story, what he's gone through to get to where he is right now in his organization, moving from one organization to another as a spinoff, and then having to go through a whole new process of creating a team, finding great talent, and creating a whole new culture starting from another organization before. So I'm really excited to share with you. This is Grace's first podcast. I think she crushed it, and I'm really excited to share this podcast with you. So enjoy the podcast with Rob Attwell and Grace Liu, and we'll chat with you very soon.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. My name is Grace, and I'm an analyst at SME Strategy. And today I'm here with Rob Attwell, who is the CEO of Careteam Technologies and also sits on a number of boards. Hi, Rob. How are you doing today?
Great. Nice to speak to you, Grace.
Awesome. It's great to hear you and come to this podcast today. And before we get started, can you just start off by telling the listeners a little bit about both Careteam and also what you do in the company?
So Careteam is a digital health platform built for healthcare systems that empowers their patients to get person-centered care. So we provide a way that they can get their discharge plan and all of the information that they need to to care for themselves at any stage in their patient journey. So our customers are hospitals, but there are also patients and then their entire family caregiver team.
Awesome. And what do you do in the company?
So I'm one of the co-founders. I'm actually COO, but I'm involved. I sort of take the COO and CFO roles, but I do a lot of things that are externally facing as well. So it's almost like a co-CEO kind of role.
Mm-hmm. And how I found you was through LinkedIn, and the company has been around for 9 months. Is that right?
Yeah, we're a spin-off of another company called My Best Helper.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the process of how you got started? Mm-hmm.
So Careteam was my co-founder and I started another company called My Best Helper, which is a care locator service for families. So it's kind of like a dating site for families and caregivers. So it has about 50,000 plus users, and it's across Canada, and it helps people to find babysitters, nannies, and so on. And while we're doing that, we wanted to find a way to be more relevant to our users by sort of giving them some tools to coordinate their daily activities and the groups and people around them. And so we created something that was like a care coordination platform, kind of like a Team Snap for families, if you will. But but once we launched it, we realized that there were bigger opportunities. We started to tell people about it, and we thought that what we wanted to do with that technology was to make money, obviously, and to get spread. And so one of the ways that and so what we're looking for more of an economic customer than a family. Like, so families, were paying us subscriptions for the My Best Helper solution, and they still do. This care coordination tool wasn't really something that we thought we could monetize easily. So we started to look for enterprise customers and sort of see where we could do it. And we looked at so we spent about 8 months looking around the health IT space. We looked at cities, we looked at communities and so on, just to see where people needed something, the kind of functionality we had. And we just realized that the entire discharge management environment and process is really, really crappy. And so, everybody we spoke to said, yes, we need this. And so we started to pitch the idea and so on. And people wanted to get involved, give us money, invest in the company. They wanted demos before we built anything. So anyway, we formed we got some advisors to help us with it. We tested our idea. We did some pitching before we built anything, and as soon as we sort of were really confident that there was a real market and that the competitive landscape was understood, we started to build the product. So we've been about 8 months from there, and now we've sold around 5,000 care plans, and we've got a couple of health authorities using it in Canada, and we're starting to spread to the US and the UK.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like you really found a need where you are very relevant to the users that you want to target, and then you use that need and also the goals to make money and spread your service around in order to make the decision to find enterprise customers and really dig into something that the entire industry needs. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we started. I mean, the most important thing for us was just to really validate and understand the customers and what their needs were. And it also had to. The other thing is that we define our kind of sandbox, or the place that we work, as solving the stress of the modern family. So everything that we've done has to sort of fit that mission, because that's how we see that we're different and the kinds of problems we want to solve. So, for example, we didn't want to solve things for problems for physicians. So physicians use care coordination software and services and so on, and there's a market there, but it's not what we wanted to do. So even though hospitals are our customers, the way that we built our product is what it does, it solves a problem for families. So when families need to care for their loved ones following an acute event or an illness, or if they're just frail elderly living at home, everything we're doing fits with our sort of overall vision and the space that we want to play in. And so we've had to say no to certain opportunities because we're like, no, that does not fit with our mission. So, so we've had, different people say to us, well, can you build this for us based on what Careteam does? And we've said, no, I'm sorry, we don't, because it's not solving the stress of the modern family. I think that's a key to strategy. It's not just what you decide to do, but it's when you say no.
Right. So because you have the vision of solving problems for the modern family, you can then prioritize what decisions are most important to you and also what kind of customers and everything you want. And you feel like that has been very effective in getting started as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's foundational.
Mm-hmm. And also just more on the team culture piece. So you have just been getting started. How do you find the right people and promote a good culture within your team to make sure you are ready to continue growing and expanding the business?
I think that, I think in terms of the team and culture, and the alignment of culture and strategy, I think the most important thing is to start by selecting people who share the values, attitudes, and align the culture that you want based on the mission of the company. So, we've found people that have an interest in our domain. We've found people that obviously have skill sets and so on that are needed for the roles that we have in the company. But, what we needed was people that sort of shared our vision, and were a fit with the culture and with the people in the company. So, we do a lot of work on screening early on, just to understand the fit. Obviously, we do testing and reference checks and all the other sort of things that you would expect in a selection process. But, really meeting with people several times is really a key in figuring out who they are and whether they sort of really can roll in what we're doing. So then the next thing is we enroll people in the culture of the company, explain it. We explain it to them multiple times. We tell them about our values, our expectations, what we are and what we're not. We reinforce that constantly. We check in for values and make sure that we catch people exhibiting the values and reinforce that. When we also, if people are not exhibiting the values, then, we talk about it and we flag it right away. And, the thing is that what we've always found is that, it's, one of the most important things is to get rid of people who are not, that don't fit with the strategy and the culture and so on when don't perform up to the sort of level of the team. If your culture is performance, you've got to demonstrate performance, and you can't tolerate it when people don't perform. So I think that's a key. It's game. It's a Jim Collins, good to great thing. Get the right people on the bus and get the wrong people off the bus, and it's usually good for everybody. So do it in a good way, in a nice way. Make sure that people are leave on good terms and that they find their next thing. We help them with that thing if that ever happens. But it's definitely about the selection process, both in terms of finding the right people and getting rid of the wrong people.
Yeah, and that's especially important as you are still starting off and growing. How do you think your culture or people or processes will change after you continue to grow bigger and scale?
Well, I think that as you get bigger, I think the need for communication gets more and more important, because you have to constantly sort of find ways to touch people and in terms of culture and strategy and so on. So obviously what happens is you have to become more structured. You have to get more, you have to structure your communication, and you have to sort of keep that communication going forward. So I think that's, it's always a challenge with companies, but I think that as long as you sort of keep bringing people on and keep reinforcing the culture and having people live and breathe the culture, and you communicate it both internally and externally, it keeps reinforcing that sort of element.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of advice would you give for listeners who are trying to lead different teams while also trying to manage a strategy?
Well, I mean, I think that our approach to this is that we integrate all the people in the company as much as possible. So we have daily Scrum strategy and sort of agile strategies. The company meets on a weekly basis, face to face. So integrating people, including them, having an open and transparent sort of approach to things, we find is a way to make sure that everybody in the company knows what other people are doing, and they're able to see the contributions of the other parts of the organization. And so I think just sort of breaking down the silos and spending the time bringing people together to interact with each other, speak to each other, ask questions, challenge each other, debate things, basically it's kind of a case of investing in a lot of sort of planning and communication so that you can flag things early. And then obviously the other thing is we use systems, right? So we have a very structured process for communicating what's going on and who's doing things. So, even if you're doing a lean startup, you have to, there's a certain amount of planning and communication, so on, that has to be done to get to your MVP. And And then the other thing that we do is we make sure that people touch our customers. So everybody in the company has to see customers and to get exposure to what the real customer needs are and how things are perceived by customers, what their responses are, what their feedback is, and so on. And so just if everybody remembers that we're building it for families, then if they're not speaking to families, we're doing something wrong.
So for you, having your people touch their customers as well is a big part of how you build up your culture as well to reflect the values that your company values.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously what we're doing there is to, one of our strategies in terms of what we're, the way we build things is for people to, have a view of how does this impact the customer. Like whatever I'm doing, if you're writing some code or you're writing a marketing document or you're doing anything in the company, like, well, how does this support serving our customers, right? I mean, some of that isn't direct. Obviously, somebody doing accounting doesn't, necessarily touch the customer. But the thing is that anybody's in the R&D team or the UX design team, obviously sales and marketing and so on, it's obviously everything has to be a customer orientation, both in terms of understanding what's working, what's not working, how we're serving needs, what the customer needs, wants, how we're perceived by them, so on. It's absolutely essential.
And that all comes down to really integrating everyone into your company and its vision.
Yeah, it's all these things go together.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give a manager or a director who is trying to manage a lot of change in their company?
Well, I think that it's always I think that when you're managing change and so on, I think that it's always, first of all, it's important to understand the people in your company and their different needs. So we certainly use some various tools to understand the needs of our employees in terms of handling change and so on. So we use a DISC assessment that helps us to understand people's work styles and their communication needs and so on. And so based on that, we know who needs a lot of communication and a lot of information about changes, and other people need less. And so we understand our team members individually and as groups. And then, but when it comes down to the communication, what we do is it always comes back to first principles, right? So when something is changing, it's a case of explaining it and rooting the communication of why that's happening in first principles. Why are we doing this? How it ties into our mission, our values, our strategy, and how it affects our customers and so on. So, and then obviously what we do is we, everybody in the company has the ability to weigh in on what we're doing. So, for example, if we have a scoring system, if somebody really disagrees with a decision, they have essentially what amounts to a yellow card or a red card. And if anybody has a red card, it's kind of like the Toyota production system. Anybody can pull the line or put up a red card, as we call it, and say, I will not, this is not something I agree with, and we're not going to move forward until it's resolved. So I think that when you empower employees to be able to stop anything that's going on in the company, I think that creates a great culture, because people are invested in the decisions. We ask them and we require that they provide their feedback, and that if they don't agree with something, they find something objectionable, or there's something that they don't think is going to work, that it violates our strategy, our values, or customers aren't going to like it or need it, or it's somehow a bad technical decision, then we empower people to put up either a yellow card or a red card, and that means we stop and we figure it out before moving on. So I think that brings quality, and that makes people enrolled in the entire process, and I think that's a key to our success.
Mm-hmm. And I really like this red card system, because in our experience also, employees always want to feel like they're needed in the organization. So I think that's a really good idea and good advice to give to our listeners as well.
Right. So we're the assets that we have are our people, mm-hmm. and so we and our the only way that we can execute is if our people are fully on board, that they agree with what we're doing, that they have the ability to have an impact on it, and if we don't, if all the decisions come from on high, then we get worse decisions, right? When the team gets involved and everybody's making decisions together. It's not that we don't set out a strategy or direction and so on from the leadership team, but in terms of, making, sort of executing that strategy, if we don't use all of our people to bring their insights, knowledge, and expertise to bear, then, we're never going to be successful.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And for you, you have to do all these things. Like, you have to integrate the people, you have to empower your employees, communicate, touch everyone's needs in the organization. How do you divide and allocate your time and resources?
That's a good question. We do some simple processes where we, as I said, we report on a weekly basis to each other as to what we've accomplished in the last week and what our goals are for the next week. We do sprint planning, so we plan our quarter and then we divide them into 2-week sprints, and so we have very clear goals and plans, and it's very structured, and it feels painful to spend the time to work on that and develop it. But the only way that we can get everything done and make sure that we're all aligned is to do that planning. And then we do a daily check-in where we are, talk about our top 3, tasks to accomplish for the day and what we accomplished yesterday, and then figure out what kind of blockers are there. So I think that planning and communication again are the 2 sort of key mechanisms that help us to figure out and allocate time. So we have a shared calendar that sort of outlines all of the company events and things that have to happen. So everything from when our sprint planning meetings are, when we do retrospectives, when we have our board meetings, when we communicate with our shareholders and with our wider sort of what we call our tribe. So all of this is scheduled and structured and planned, and so you have to look at the schedule, and and then we also have a schedule as to when our goals have to be accomplished. So it's this kind of systems that sort of support the strategy and people both being accountable and holding others accountable for those deadlines.
And a lot of our listeners are small to medium-sized companies, and for them, it's difficult to get everyone on board with these kind of systems when they're newly introduced. So how do you kind of motivate your employees to do daily reporting or use these systems very carefully so that you can manage the communication very well?
Well, I mean, I think it's just, none of these are particularly onerous. It's just kind of a case of just creating a routine, and everybody knows that it's expected of them, and everybody, this is just how we communicate. So this is just how things work. So it's not we have other things in terms of how we document our code, how we document our time, our hours, and everything else. And so, being part of our organization means, having to do some of this, but then, we also give people the ability to work on their own projects that are related to what we do. So, there's the sort of formal, structured, goal-oriented stuff that we do, but we also do things like hackathons. We let people work on innovative projects and initiatives as well. And so, there's give and take. So, we're thinking about letting them let their creativity and innovation out and to try some things, and we bring other people in we have internal hackathons, and we bring external people in to sort of either judge or participate in those. So there's a balance between innovation and structure, and then the other thing is we have processes where we want people to be able to accomplish their own goals in terms of professional and personal development. So, we talk to them about what they want to accomplish and so on. So, I mean, it's a whole sort of, I guess, we're fairly mature in terms of the way we do things for an early stage company, mostly because we're kind of mid-career founders. So that, gives us a lot of experience. We've worked in bigger organizations and run big projects and, done $100 million projects before. So it's sort of, we've got a good skill set. But I think that to answer your question in terms of how to get, my advice to founders that have smaller companies where you have teams of 2 or 3 is that, just because you're small, there's no excuse for not planning. And setting goals and setting timelines and deadlines. And so, things don't happen in a vacuum. And so if you don't plan, nothing gets done, right? So if you don't spend the time to think about where you're going and what you want to do, and so it doesn't have to be a big onerous process, but it's like, where are we going to be in 2 weeks from now? What do we want to accomplish? And then the other thing is, you should measure what you're doing all the way along, right? So if and the most important thing to measure is, what do your customers think of what you're doing? Right? And what does the market think? Like, how many people respond to this message? Like, if I how many people can I get to sign up on a landing page? Like, it's just, and how many experiments are you doing, right? So you should be planning how you are going to develop your company or your value proposition, or figure out where a market is, and so on. And so all of this requires a little bit of thought and agreement between a co-founder team. And so, a startup's not a startup if it's one person. You need 2, 3, 4 people to make a startup and to create some velocity. And the only way to make velocity happen is for your group to plan and decide where you're going and what you're going to do, right? And to agree or disagree and debate and figure out what has to be done, but then to make a plan and execute it. So.
Right. And it sounds like you found the balance between having processes and also creativity and innovation, because something that we do find is that some companies get really bogged down by processes and therefore tamper on the innovation aspect. But you really focus on employee development and the culture piece and making sure everyone is empowered to reach their own goals as well.
Yeah, I think that there's, people don't come and work for startups because they want to work 9 to 5 or because they want to do what everybody else is doing. So, you've got to find a way to encourage people to to want to sort of contribute in terms of innovation and to figure out ways for them to develop and develop their passion. Usually when we have software developers, one of the things we hire for is we love people who love to code, right? So, and if people love to code, they love to learn, and so we provide ways for them to develop things. We provide access to knowledge-based stuff so they can read everything they want to read and learn everything they want to learn, and we encourage them to do that. So
that's awesome. Now, what is kind of like the main challenge that you're still facing in your role right now?
It's just typical startup stuff is, we're kind of, we've got so much to do that it's kind of a case of figuring out how to simplify things so that you can do sales, fundraising, R&D, operations, everything else you need to do, and get it all done on time. So, it's just a case of, the challenge of startups is that there's no end point to the work. And so it's a case of figuring out how to be effective as opposed to, you can't avoid lots of time spent and hours spent, but it's also a case of figuring out how to be the most effective and how to bring other people in from the outside to help accelerate your progress. So, and these include advisors, investors, partners, channels, and so on. So startups don't succeed by having their own little insular thing. You got to reach out to the network and the ecosystem around you and draw that into your mission and enroll other systems, networks, partners, companies, and so on to help you to accelerate. And so we're always thinking about, what are the chess moves and the strategies that we can where we can add capacity by bringing stronger, more powerful partners that need what we are doing and that need our innovation to deliver results to their user bases, customers, and so on.
Mm-hmm. So it's all about the hustle and bringing in the right people.
Yeah, all those and more. Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
Hustle, hard work.
Mm-hmm. And as we're wrapping up, is there a final thought or piece of advice that you'd like to give our listeners about managing people, processes, or a business in general?
I think that there is I think that you've got to kind of, there's an important balance, I think, between monitoring the external environment, looking for opportunities, threats, competitors, and so on, all the trends that may be impacting you. And so this is, a constant issue. So constantly reading about your industry and seeing yourself not as part of the startup industry, but as the industry that you're going to serve is important. And understanding that market. And so there's a balance between looking at what's happening externally and sticking to your vision and not getting distracted and pivoting too soon. But that's always a balance. But so that's one part of it, my advice. And the second part of the advice is just to read, right? So successful founders, successful investors, successful people in any walk of life are people who read. And so I recommend that you read about your industry, you read newsletters, blogs, listen to podcasts. So fortunately, people who are listening to this podcast are, already on that plan. But, and then, read books from opinion leaders, read biographies, and read classic business books, whether it's Peter Drucker or reading, new stuff. Like I'm just, my current read is Platform Revolution, because we're thinking about what we're doing in terms of being a platform. So to end that, read as much as read 8 to 10 hours a week if you can.
Right, that's awesome. And it really boils down to keeping yourself informed, both with the external environment and also reading about people in your industry and people who have been successful.
Right. And the thing is, business isn't new, right? Like, the thing is, people have been innovating for, hundreds of years. And so, like, reading about great thinkers and inventors and so on, you'll find surprisingly relevant to you working today in the digital economy, right? So it's you don't have to just read what's out there now. Like, read about great business leaders of the past as well.
That's wonderful. Well, that is our time up for today. Really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation, Rob.
Okay, enjoyed it. Thanks, Chris.
Awesome. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care. Bye.
And that was Rob Attwell from the Careteam Technologies. Thank you for tuning in to our Strategy and Leadership podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, please check out the rest of the series on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. See you next time.